Lingchi, death by 1,000 cuts. The blade. In imperial China, 1620, a man convicted of matricide was bound to a wooden frame in Beijing's execution ground. The executioner approached with a small, precise knife. This was not designed to kill quickly. What remained was the methodical removal of flesh, piece by piece, until the body could sustain no more. The condemned stood upright, secured to the frame. Ropes bit into wrists and ankles. The crowd gathered in silence. Officials verified the sentence, reading aloud the crime. The executioner sharpened his blade one final time, then began his work. The first cut removed skin from the chest. Blood welled immediately. The cut was shallow, avoiding vital organs. The executioner moved to the shoulder, another cut, then the thigh. Each removal was deliberate, measured. The blade sliced cleanly through skin and subcutaneous fat. The knife never went deep enough to sever major vessels. Within the first hour, dozens of cuts covered the torso. The condemned remained conscious. Guards forced water between his lips to prevent death from shock. The executioner worked systematically, moving in a pattern known only to those trained in this art. Left side, then right. Upper body, then lower. By the second hour, muscle tissue became visible beneath removed skin. The red flesh glistened. The executioner paused periodically, allowing the condemned to remain aware of each new cut. There was no mercy in the pause. It served only to prolong consciousness. The condemned's screams had become hoarse. After 3 hours, the cuts numbered in the hundreds. Blood loss should have brought death. Instead, attendants applied pressure to the worst wounds, ensuring the condemned survived. They used cloths soaked in salt water. The burning sensation revived him when awareness began to fade. The knife moved to the arms. Small sections of flesh came away, revealing the muscles beneath. Then the legs. Each cut was approximately 2 inches long, 1 inch wide. The executioner avoided hands and feet initially, reserving them for later stages. On the 4th hour, the executioner worked on the extremities. Each finger received individual attention. The knife scraped bone on the right index finger. A strip of flesh came away, leaving bone exposed and white. Then the middle finger, the ring finger. The condemned's fingers became collections of exposed tendons and bone. Between cuts, attendants applied rice wine to the wounds, not for mercy, but to prevent infection that might bring premature death. The goal was duration, not speed. Officials recorded each stage in ledgers. It should have ended there. It did not. The cuts moved to the face. Small sections of skin were removed from the cheeks, revealing teeth through the gaps. Then the forehead. The ears were carved away in pieces. The condemned remained conscious through this final stage. The final stage began after 6 hours. The executioner made deeper cuts, finally severing major vessels in the neck and groin. Blood flowed freely. The condemned's body convulsed. Within minutes, the body slumped against the ropes. Death came not from any single wound, but from accumulated trauma of hundreds of cuts. The body remained on the frame for 3 days. Citizens passed by, observing the official punishment. The practice would continue in China until 1905. The breaking wheel. Aggravated murder. In Bavaria, 1738, a man convicted of killing a family was transported to the execution ground outside Munich. A large wooden wheel, 8 feet in diameter, lay horizontal on the ground. He would not die from a single blow. What followed was the systematic destruction of every major bone in his body, delivered according to court specifications that prescribed 19 precise blows. The condemned was stripped and placed across the wheel. His limbs were stretched outward and bound to iron stakes driven into the ground. Arms extended at right angles, legs spread wide. The position left him completely exposed. The executioner read the sentence aloud. 8 blows to the legs, 8 to the arms, 3 to the body. The executioner carried an iron-bound wooden bar, 3 feet long and heavy enough to shatter bone with a single strike. He positioned himself carefully, measuring the distance. The first blow landed on the shin of the right leg. Bone cracked audibly. The condemned screamed. The leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood welled where skin had split from impact. The executioner waited. Silence fell over the crowd. Then the second blow struck the left shin. Another crack. The sound echoed off surrounding buildings. The executioner moved up the legs. Third blow to the right thigh. The femur, the strongest bone in the human body, broke cleanly. The muscle tissue swelled immediately. Fourth blow to the left thigh. Both legs now hung useless, supported only by the ropes. The condemned's breath came in ragged gasps. Blows 5 through 8 targeted the knees and ankles. The 5th blow shattered the right knee, the kneecap breaking into fragments. The 6th destroyed the left knee with equal force. Blow 7 crushed the right ankle. The 8th blow finished the left ankle. Both legs were shattered in multiple places, bone fragments visible through torn skin, white against red. The executioner paused. He walked around the wheel to the condemned's right arm. The 9th blow fell on the forearm, snapping both radius and ulna with a double crack. The hand flopped uselessly, attached only by skin and tendon. Blow 10 shattered the left forearm. 11 and 12 destroyed the upper arms, the humerus bones breaking with hollow snaps. 13 through 16 broke the elbows and shoulders, each joint collapsing under the iron-bound bar. Every major limb bone was now fractured. The condemned remained conscious, though deep shock had set in. His limbs hung at impossible angles. Bone protruded through skin in several places. Blood pooled beneath the wheel. The executioner raised the bar again. Blow 17 struck the ribs on the right side. Multiple ribs cracked simultaneously. The condemned's breathing became labored, wheezing. Blow 18 shattered ribs on the left. His chest caved inward slightly. The 19th blow struck the spine. The body convulsed once, then went still. Death came from internal bleeding and organ damage. But death was only the beginning of the display. Attendants threaded the broken body through the wheel's spokes, weaving limbs between the wooden bars. The wheel was mounted on a tall pole in the town square. The broken body remained visible for weeks, a warning to all who passed. Birds fed on the corpse. The practice continued in parts of Germany until 1841. Execution by elephant. Royal justice. In the Sultanate of Aceh, 1620, a man found guilty of attempted regicide was brought before the Sultan's trained elephant. Thousands gathered in the palace grounds to witness the spectacle. The elephant had been starved for 2 days and trained specifically for this purpose. The execution would not be quick. What remained was a series of commands, each escalating in violence, designed to demonstrate absolute power before granting death. The elephant's mahout had trained the animal for weeks, teaching it specific responses to commands. The creature learned to lift, to apply varying degrees of pressure, to crush on command. On the morning of execution, it was brought to the palace grounds where a platform had been constructed. The condemned was led forward, hands bound behind his back. Guards forced him to kneel. The crowd pressed close, held back by soldiers with spears. Children were lifted onto shoulders. The Sultan, seated on an elevated throne, gave a signal. The mahout spoke the first command. The elephant extended its trunk, wrapping it around the condemned's torso. The trunk, strong enough to uproot trees, encircled him completely. It lifted him 5 feet off the ground. The crowd watched in silence. The elephant held him there for several minutes, his ribs compressed under the pressure. Then, at another command, the elephant lowered him back to the platform. The second command came. The elephant placed one massive foot on the condemned's left leg. The foot alone weighed hundreds of pounds. Slowly, it applied pressure. The leg bent. The knee buckled inward. Bone cracked. The condemned screamed. The sound cut through the silence. The elephant removed its foot. The leg hung twisted. The knee dislocated. Minutes passed. The sun beat down. The condemned writhed in pain. The third command sent the elephant's foot onto the right leg. Again, controlled pressure. Again, the crack of breaking bone as the femur snapped. Both legs now useless. The fourth command brought the elephant's foot to the condemned's right arm. The same slow pressure. The radius and ulna snapped together. Then the fifth command, and the left arm received identical treatment. 4 limbs now shattered. The condemned lay on the platform, unable to move anything except his head. Still breathing, still aware. It should have ended there. It did not. The Sultan gave another signal. The elephant moved closer, positioning itself directly over the prone body. Guards stepped back. The sixth and final command came quietly. The elephant placed its foot on the condemned's chest. This time, the pressure did not stop at breaking ribs. The foot pressed down steadily. Ribs cracked. The chest cavity began to collapse. Blood appeared at his mouth. The elephant continued pressing until the chest cavity collapsed entirely, crushing heart and lungs together. Death came within seconds. The body remained on the platform until sunset. Guards removed it after dark and threw it into a mass grave outside the city walls. British colonial records documented similar executions in India through the 1,870 seconds. Death by boiling. Poisoning. On the 15th of April, 1532, at Smithfield in London, Richard Roos was transported to a large iron cauldron filled with water. He had been convicted of poisoning several members of the household where he worked as a cook. Parliament had passed a specific statute making death by boiling the prescribed punishment for murder by poison. He would not die from a single immersion. What followed was repeated exposure to scalding water, with brief removals to ensure continued consciousness. The cauldron had been heating since dawn. Wooden logs fed the fire beneath it. By the time Roos arrived, the water roiled with steam. Bubbles rose to the surface. Guards had constructed a wooden frame above it, with a rope and pulley system. Roos was stripped and bound in a sitting position, legs forced against his chest, arms tied around his knees. The first immersion lasted 30 seconds. The rope lowered him until his feet and lower legs entered the boiling water. The reaction was immediate. His screams were raw and primal. His body convulsed against the restraints. Guards lifted him out. His lower legs were bright red, skin beginning to blister. Steam rose from the scalded flesh. The smell of burnt skin filled the air. They waited 2 minutes. The The crowd watched as blisters formed. Some burst immediately, weeping clear fluid. Then the second immersion came. This time, he went into the waist. The water scalded his legs, genitals, and lower abdomen. 30 seconds. His screams had changed pitch, then up again. His screams had become continuous. Blisters covered every immersed portion. Some had burst, exposing raw flesh beneath. The crowd watched from behind barriers. Many had paid admission to attend. The third immersion went to his chest. By now, skin was sloughing off his legs in sheets. Where skin had peeled away, muscle tissue showed red. The water around him turned pink with blood and fluid. 40 seconds this time. The executioners counted aloud. Then up. He was still conscious, though shock had set in. His eyes rolled back. His body convulsed uncontrollably. The blisters on his chest had formed instantly. The fourth immersion was complete. His entire body submerged, except for his head. 1 full minute in the boiling water. When they pulled him out, large sections of skin no longer adhered to his body. It hung in strips. Muscle tissue was visible on his legs and torso. They lowered him again for the final time. This time, his head went under. Bubbles rose to the surface. After 2 minutes, they pulled him out. He was dead. The body remained in the cauldron until the water cooled, then was removed and buried in an unmarked grave. The statute authorizing death by boiling was repealed in 1547, just 15 years after its passage. The breaking wheel, extended suffering. The sentence specified no final blow. In Saxony, 1722, a man convicted of multiple murders was taken to the wheel. The executioner had been instructed to break his limbs, but deliberately avoid delivering the coup de grace. He would remain on the wheel until death came naturally from exposure and infection. What followed was days of agony, broken bones grinding against each other with every movement. The breaking proceeded as standard, 16 blows delivered systematically to arms and legs, each bone shattered according to the pattern. The condemned screamed through the first 8 blows. By blow 12, he had lost his voice. But the final blows to the torso never came. Instead, the executioner wove the broken body through the wheel's spokes and mounted it on the pole. The condemned was still breathing. The first day, the condemned remained conscious for hours. Every slight shift caused broken bones to grind against each other. He could not move without causing fresh agony. No position offered relief. His shattered limbs hung uselessly. Birds circled overhead. The sun beat down. He had no water, no shade. Passers-by stopped to stare. Some threw stones. By the second day, infection had set in. The open fractures where bone had punctured skin began to suppurate. Yellow pus oozed from the wounds. The smell attracted flies. They landed on the wounds, laying eggs. Fever took hold. His skin became hot to the touch, then cold and clammy. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Crows arrived, attracted by infection and open wounds. They landed on the wheel, pecking at exposed flesh. They ate the soft tissue around his wounds. The third day brought rain. The condemned, unable to shield himself, was soaked through. Water ran into his open wounds. Hypothermia combined with fever. His body shook uncontrollably, each movement grinding broken bones together. The sound was audible to those near the pole. His teeth chattered. His lips turned blue. On the fourth day, he stopped responding to external stimuli. His eyes remained open but unseeing. His breathing became shallow and irregular. Internal bleeding from the broken ribs had caused fluid to accumulate in his chest cavity. Each breath bubbled and rattled. His body began to shut down, organ by organ. Death came on the morning of the 5th day, not from the broken bones themselves, but from septic shock and multi-organ failure. His eyes remained open. His body remained woven through the spokes. The body remained on the wheel for another 2 weeks before officials ordered it removed. Records indicate this extended form was reserved for the most heinous crimes. Scaphism, the ancient account. The boats. Plutarch, writing in the 1st century CE, recorded an account from historian Ctesias about a punishment allegedly used in ancient Persia. A man convicted of killing a satrap was sentenced to scaphism. The method was designed to cause death through exposure and insect infestation over many days. According to the account, the process began with 2 wooden boats, or hollowed logs, each shaped to fit half a human body. The condemned was placed in the first boat, lying on his back. The second boat was inverted over him, creating an enclosed space. Only his head, hands, and feet protruded through holes cut in the wood. Leather straps secured the boats together. The executioners began force-feeding the condemned a mixture of milk and honey. They poured it down his throat in large quantities until he was forced to swallow. The excess ran down his face and neck. They also smeared honey thickly on his exposed head, hands, and feet. The boats were then set afloat in a stagnant pond, or left in direct sunlight. The condemned remained trapped, unable to move anything except his extremities. The sun beat down on his exposed face. The enclosed space became hot. Within hours, according to the account, the honey attracted insects. Flies landed on the honey-smeared portions, covering his face and hands. They crawled into his ears and nose. More insects were drawn by the smell of waste, as the condemned, unable to control his bodily functions, defiled the enclosed space. The milk and honey produced severe diarrhea. By the second day, the force feeding resumed. More milk and honey were poured down his throat. More honey was smeared on exposed skin, attracting fresh swarms. The mixture caused continued diarrhea, which accumulated in the boats with nowhere to drain. The condemned lay in his own waste. The heat warmed the enclosed space. The smell intensified. The condemned's exposed skin began to burn, blisters forming from direct sunlight. Dehydration set in. His lips cracked and bled. His tongue swelled. On the third day and beyond, according to Plutarch, insects laid eggs in the waste and in any wounds on the exposed portions. The warm environment proved ideal for hatching. Maggots appeared, white and writhing. The account describes them burrowing into living flesh, feeding on the condemned while he remained conscious. They entered wounds, then created new wounds, tunneling beneath the skin. Death, according to Plutarch's account, took anywhere from several days to more than 2 weeks, resulting from septic shock, dehydration, or exposure. However, modern historians note that scaphism appears only in Greek sources. No Persian records confirm its use. Many scholars consider the account unreliable, possibly invented by Greek writers to depict Persian cruelty. Judicial torture, the strappado. The interrogation. In Florence, 1478, a man accused of conspiracy against the Medici family was taken to the basement of the Palazzo Vecchio for questioning. Judicial torture was legally permitted in courts across Europe to extract confessions, operating under specific legal restrictions. The method chosen was the strappado, designed to cause maximum pain without visible exterior injury. What followed was rope-based torture that dislocated joints and tore ligaments, repeated until the accused confessed. The accused's hands were bound behind his back, wrists tied tightly with rough rope. A longer rope attached to the wrist bindings ran up through a pulley mounted in the ceiling beam. 2 guards hauled on the rope, lifting the accused off the floor by his arms alone. The shoulders immediately took the full weight of the body in an unnatural position. The accused's feet left the floor. He rose 1 foot, then 2, then 3. His arms, forced upward behind his back, strained against their sockets. The accused hung, suspended, arms wrenched backward. Within seconds, the pain was intense. Within a minute, it became unbearable. The interrogator, seated at a table with paper and ink, asked questions. The accused, dangling 3 feet off the ground, gave answers. They were deemed unsatisfactory. The interrogator made a note. He nodded to the guards. They released the rope suddenly. The accused dropped through the air. The rope caught him violently just before he hit the floor. The sudden stop wrenched his shoulders with tremendous force. The weight of his falling body, suddenly arrested, pulled his arms nearly from their sockets. The first drop partially dislocated both shoulders. Ligaments stretched and tore. The accused screamed. They hauled him up again. More questions came, more unsatisfactory answers. Another drop. The rope caught him again. By the third drop, both shoulders were fully dislocated. The humeral heads had separated from the shoulder sockets. The arms hung at grotesque angles. Any movement caused fresh agony. They raised him again anyway. The session continued for an hour, 7 drops in total. Each one tore more ligaments, caused more structural damage. Tendons snapped, muscles ripped. By the end, the ligaments in both shoulders were permanently destroyed. Even after the torture ended and the accused was lowered to the ground, he could not move his arms. They hung useless at his sides. He confessed. Everything they wanted to hear, he said. The confession was recorded, deemed legally valid under the statutes, permitting judicial torture. He signed it with his left hand, barely able to grip the pen. He was tried 3 days later, convicted based on the confession, and executed by beheading. Records indicate the strappado was used extensively in both secular and ecclesiastical courts throughout medieval and early modern Europe. Medical accounts describe the permanent disabilities it caused. Devices of uncertain origin. Historical records present significant challenges when examining certain torture devices frequently mentioned in popular accounts. 2 implements, in particular the heretic's fork and rat torture, lacked the strong primary documentation found for well-verified practices like Lingchi, the breaking wheel, or the strappado. The heretic's fork appears in some later references as a metal implement with 2 sets of prongs, one bracing under the chin and another on the chest, designed to restrict movement and prevent the victim from speaking or lowering their head. The device supposedly forced the head into an upright position continuously, causing extreme discomfort and preventing sleep. Some accounts associate it specifically with the Spanish Inquisition and other ecclesiastical courts. However, scholarly evaluations indicate severely limited primary documentation for its actual legal use, especially within formal inquisitorial procedures. Extensive research into inquisitorial court records, trial transcripts, and official manuals from the period reveals virtually no mention of this specific device. Its attribution to the Inquisition appears to stem from later summaries, museum labels, and sensational lists compiled in the 18th and 19th centuries rather than verified contemporary court records from the medieval or early modern period. The device is considered plausible as a restraint or psychological intimidation tool in some contexts, but it is not strongly evidenced as a standard inquisitorial instrument actually employed in formal judicial proceedings. No trial records describe its use. No contemporary accounts from accused heretics mention it. No inquisitorial manuals prescribe its application. Rat torture, as popularly depicted in stories and films of rats attacking bound victims, faces similar evidentiary problems. The common narrative describes victims bound to tables with containers of rats placed on their stomachs. The containers then heated to drive the rats to burrow through the victim's flesh to escape the heat. Reliable primary historical records confirming its widespread use in official courts, including inquisitorial tribunals, are entirely lacking. Searches through legal codices, judicial records, and contemporary accounts from the medieval and early modern periods produce no verified documentation of this method as standard legal practice. Some later narratives mentioning rat torture come from secondary sources, anecdotal accounts, or works of fiction rather than official legal documentation. The Inquisition itself, referring to several ecclesiastical courts established in medieval and early modern Europe to combat heresy, did legally permit torture in some proceedings to extract confessions. However, even inquisitorial torture operated under specific restrictions outlined in papal bulls and church law. The idea that specific devices, like the heretic's fork or rat torture, were standard inquisitorial tools is contested or directly unsupported in primary legal records. Historical research conducted over the past century indicates that mentions of these devices often derive from later sensational sources, propaganda literature, anti-Catholic polemics from the Reformation period, and 19th century torture museum collections rather than authentic inquisitorial manuals or trial records. This distinction carries significant weight. The well-documented methods described earlier in this account, Lingchi with its 1,000-year documented history, the breaking wheel with its detailed legal specifications, execution by elephant witnessed and recorded by colonial administrators, death by boiling prescribed in English statute, and the strappado detailed in court records across Europe all appear in official legal codes. Multiple contemporary accounts, court records, and sometimes even photographs or illustrations from the period of their use. The heretic's fork and rat torture lack equivalent documentation. While stories and depictions of such methods circulated widely in later periods, their use as formal legal practice remains unverified by credible primary sources from the periods when they allegedly occurred.